This week's episode of The Clear Out was recorded on the 29th of December 2021 at home in Wicklow. And I wanted to bring the year to a close with a very mellow, calm, reflective, contemplative episode, which I felt was quite a natural way to end the year, as I feel many of us do. You get to the end of the year and there's a bit of a stock take feeling. There's a bit of a decompression, a bit of a pause of gathering oneself and holding oneself before we hit that end of year button. So that's what it is. It's a nice, gentle, chilled episode, a little bit of a reflection on the year that's been. There's a movie reference that I think links into a certain end of times thinking, and I conclude this episode with a meditation that I've taken from the wellness and sleep app Aura. It's a meditation I did for the app earlier this year, and I just felt it might be a nice way. I felt it was going to be a nice way to end the episode. So that's there at the end of the episode, and if you get that far, I hope you enjoy what you hear. So without further ado, The Clear Out is next. I'll see you there. Cheers.
Ooh, not gonna change my mind, leaving the dream behind.
Hi, my name is Dara Clear, and you're listening to The Clear Out. How are you? We're very nearly there. It's almost the end of the year. We have a couple of days left. That's it. And it's, as ever, at the end of the year, it's a time that we naturally, well, I certainly always feel for myself, it's a time that we very naturally take stock. It's a time for that inventory check of the previous 12 months, the 365 days that have just been ticked off again. And there is something about the post-Christmas lull where the energy just drops right off, and it's quite a nice time. I find a very nice time for a little bit of reflection. Sometimes that can you can be ambushed by what comes up, by what rises from the subconscious in those quiet moments, the post frenzy moments, all that rushing round, all that preparation, and all that food and drink and all that excess and merrymaking and sharing of the moment. It's tremendous sort of indulgence and gluttony in a way, this kind of willful, wanton gluttony. And I'm trying to use gluttony in a nice way there and disassociate it from its usual negative connotations. We're basically, slathering ourselves in trifle and more turkey and gravy and all the trimmings. My God, I was overwhelmed on Christmas Day. The food, the board was heaving with food, and I mean, I could barely tolerate any alcohol because there was so much food to be consumed. I drank very little. That's not unusual for me, to be fair. But yeah, it was nice. I had a nice Christmas. Thanks for asking. We had a nice Christmas here at #blessed, and my cousin and his partner joined us, and it was really lovely, actually. But anyway, listen, really, I want this to be a very mellow a very mellow episode of the Clear Out to wrap up the year. And I don't mind saying I'm quite proud of myself to have got this little project of mine, this podcast, to have got it off the ground back at the end of May, not really knowing how it was going to go, and to have sustained what is now 32 episodes, this being the 32nd, and to have managed to put it out once a week like clockwork. I am just going to give myself a little pat on the back and go, well done me. I'm never afraid to do that within reason. That's not an excess of self-regard. That is, I think what is due, and I'll take it. In the absence of anybody else patting me on the back, or patting me on the head in a patronising way like a good dog, I'll do it for myself. Good boy, well done. And you can't see it, but my little tail is wagging. I'm a happy dog. Wag, wag, wag. So yeah, and that's what I mean about the inventory, about the stock take. We get to this time of year and it's like, wow, what a year. And I am certain for some of you out there who are listening, it's been another monstrous year. The enormity of the pressure of the pandemic, another year of the pandemic, and restrictions and lockdowns and yes, infections. Some people getting the damn thing, the COVID, and living with the aftermath of that. It's been another punishing year, and I am certain there are those of you out there, and I know some people personally who have been through some really tough stuff. There have been losses, and there have been sicknesses, and there have been near-death experiences, and stress. That stuff takes a toll. You know, it doesn't have to be a pandemic for that stuff not to take a toll, but that constitutes punishing times. What we have to withstand, what we have to endure, the resources we have to find in ourselves to rally, to stand up, to meet the challenge, to overcome what has been laying in our path. That is, it's what humans are great at, I think. I mean, that's that. We're amazing at adapting. We're amazing at dealing with what is put in front of us to the best of our ability. In any given moment, that may not always be optimum performance. That may not always be optimum response, but it's what we do, isn't it? It's part of our survival instinct, and we are adaptable. We people, we humans, we Homo sapiens, we're quite extraordinary in this regard, I think. We can stop and sing the praises of the animal kingdom and various Darwinian adaptations to environment, and that's all. That all justifies its own applause and acclaim and fascination. But there's something about the way we live, about human endeavor and human striving and the human attempt to rein things in and pull things under control, and to build our happy homes, to feather our nests, to achieve what we set out to achieve. I mean, so much of it is a delusion. So much of it is it's a form of denial of the messiness of life. So much of it is, it's a tiny little umbrella against an enormous tsunami of seawater that's about to come crashing down, and yet we think, no, I've done a lot to to make this umbrella perfect. I have it just the way I want it, and I'm gonna push that right into the face of that tsunami, and I'm gonna hold tight and put my shoulder into it, and that tsunami is gonna wash over me, and it's gonna be tough, but I'm still gonna be here on the other side of it. And I think for many of us, that's what the pandemic experience has been for this, a full 12 months of it in 2021. And the rollout of vaccines, and was getting vaccinated the right thing to do? Did we respond well to it? Did we respond really badly to it? I personally got my booster shot today, so that's a third dose of something. My first 2 vaccinations were Pfizer, and this was a Moderna vaccine, which my doctor administered that today, and he was like, look, the percentages of effectiveness of this one are a little bit higher at the moment. And I was like, yeah, look, and I said I can't emphasize how little anxiety I have about this. I'm very accepting that the experts are very far away from where I am and they're making the decisions about what should come down the track, and I'm like, okay, just give it to me, stick it in my arm, and I'll get on with the rest of my day. Thanks very much. Now, that's a luxury that I have. My wife, as a frontline worker, the doctor himself, he was like, look, we have to stay on top of every bit of information, every latest development, every latest revelation from the research, and we can't afford to be blasé or unthinking or not anxious about this. And I acknowledge that, and I was acknowledging that to my wife just the other night. We were talking about it, like she's been out there in the world with the pandemic on the front line, in her particular job at the moment, whereas I've been a little home bunny in the burrow. And here, another tale, a little bunny tale, just bunnying away at home, doing my projects, teaching martial arts and creating content for the wellness app, and doing the podcast, and being the stay-at-home dad, and doing what I have to do in that capacity, and trying to stay fit and keep my own mental health on the right track. And all of that takes effort. All of that takes a conscious commitment to produce the material that I'm producing, to bring good energy to my students, to bring good energy to the podcast, to bring good energy and good creativity to the wellness app Aura that I've been producing stuff for now for about 6 months. And yeah, it's an ongoing effort, and I'm very lucky in that that's stuff I enjoy doing. It's not particularly financially rewarding yet, but I view all of these things as long-term projects. So in that regard, I look at this year as a very, personally speaking, I look at it as a very successful year. Certainly a very auspicious year in terms of getting a few projects off the ground and committing to them, and that does seem to be something that over the years I've shown myself to be good at, to be able to commit and maintain discipline and maintain routine. There's a sort of a conservative impulse in that. I think it drives my wife mad. I think I think she sees it as a lack of spontaneity. But I go, no, this is the scaffolding upon which I will live well and calmly, with a sense of control, no matter how illusory that may be. Anyway, it wasn't my intention to bang on about myself in this way. I was more interested, and I am more interested for this episode, just to sort of acknowledge how well I think we've we've all done, how well we've all had to do to get through another year of this very strange, altered reality that is so unsatisfying on so many levels, that doesn't really allow the full expression of who we are. It hasn't allowed the full expression of our social impulse, and that is a deprivation. And it doesn't really matter, how well off you are. It's not really a material situation, although certainly you may be materially more comfortable and in a nicer place, or be able to, I don't know, I mean, whatever the implications are of that, there's still a deprivation involved when you haven't been able to see your friends, or you haven't been able to interact with the people you care about in the way you normally would, in a way you don't have to think about. And there is a spontaneity, of course, in natural human interaction, and an ability to respond to our positive impulses, to act upon them, and to exchange energy. And that, in many ways, is something that has been taken away. And, it remains to be seen. I mean, this state of caution and this state of anxiety and concern and this state of frustration and anger and paranoia and suspicion for some people. I mean, there's a lot of people who have taken very strong anti-vaccine stances, and people who've embraced a certain amount of conspiracy thinking. And I'm not here to judge that. I think that position comes from very deeply held convictions. It comes from a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear. It comes from anger. It comes from a sense of helplessness, powerlessness. It comes from a sense of frustration with maybe the flow of information, access to more nuanced, balanced information and dialogue about the pros and cons of the vaccine. I mean, I haven't really gone there myself, as I said, because I've just been very accepting of medical bodies, of scientists, of pharmaceutical companies. Am I going that far? Oh yeah, I've always trusted Pfizer from a young age. I always felt they had my best interests at heart. I'm not really saying that. I mean, I just think the pharmaceutical companies, they're just the machine. I don't know. I just kind of think scientists they're on the side of good. Is that completely naive? Is that an absurd thing to say? Look, I have nothing to qualify that with. It's that's my own notional kind of idealism that makes an assumption that the vast majority of scientists are vocational. They're trying to improve humanity's experience. I mean, and look, how broad a term is scientists anyway? But you know what I mean. Yeah. So, what is the conclusion of this meander? This long point. The conclusion is, my goodness, if you're like me, don't you feel exhausted? Aren't you feeling wrecked? Aren't you tired after this huge year that's been yet another massive juggling act of what to do, what not to do, keeping your anxiety in check, trying to do best foot forward planning, trying to exercise a certain amount of control, impulse control, regulate those impulses, try to keep the anger and frustration at bay, trying to still enjoy a certain quality of life, and also, having to look around at the people who are in your life and having to accept that they might not be responding in the same way that you are, that they may have a very different frame through which they're looking at this new world we find ourselves in. And so again, I just say, yeah, hasn't it been tiring? And isn't it nice to get to the end of this year? And isn't it nice to contemplate the turning over of a new calendar, to think, okay, maybe there are better things to come next year. And look, it would seem the received wisdom is telling us that the coronavirus is going to roll, and obviously Omicron has arrived and is rampant, and it seems there are many, many more people becoming infected, and it seems it's less vicious, less impactful than the earlier iterations of the virus. And maybe this is how it's going to continue to go. It'll be more widespread, it'll be less potent until it's something we can live with quite easily. And maybe we're all going to get infected at some point, at some level. And just hopefully, if you do get infected, it meets you at a time when your immune system is in pretty good shape and able to withstand it, and you can kind of soldier on. But my advocacy is, you do what you have to do to stay safe. You act according to your own knowledge of your own body, your own system, and don't be afraid to tell people to back off until you're very much comfortable with letting them closer. That is your right. So, there you go. Now, what do I want to talk about now? I'm still in this sort of reflective, what a year it's been mode of thinking. And obviously I am focusing a little bit on the travails and tough times that many of us have experienced, and putting that into the context of this division of time that we use to understand our lives, the chronology, the temporal line. Another year chalked off, another year older, another year wiser, another year less stupid, another year more stubborn. I don't know. That's not for me to say. Another year of learning is how I like to think of it. Certainly there's been stuff that's happened to me this year in my relationship, in my life, that requires looking at, that requires learning from, that is asking me to step up in a new way, in a different way, in a healthier way as I face into a new year. And as challenging as that's been, I welcome the opportunity to be better. I welcome the opportunity to adapt. I welcome the opportunity to try and create something nicer, something stronger, something more resilient. I welcome the opportunity to try and invite more positivity and love into my life, and hopefully those things will happen. So I was watching a Frank Capra movie the other day, and it was one I hadn't seen before. I remember I managed to get my hands on it last year. I didn't get around to watching it, and I had it in my back pocket as a quiet Christmas afternoon one to watch this year. And so the other day, my wife and daughter, I'd been out. I wasn't in great form. I was kind of taking a bit of a negative headspace turn, and got a bit dark, but I took myself off. Went down to the sea and was hoping to swim, but it was too rough, and that was not helpful. That didn't do anything for my mood. I just sat in my car and sulked and looked at the sea, and I was like, damn you, sea, for being too rough. I just don't have the... I've definitely put myself into water like that before, and I would have been, and I'm confident that I could have got into it that day and been fine. But sometimes it's knowing when to put yourself into the battle. It's knowing when to pick that fight. And I just knew I didn't have the energy. I didn't have the energy to brazen it out and keep my head in the right place to be safe in that rough water. And so I was like, no, it's too rough. It's too rough for my headspace today. It's too rough for where my head is at. And I just sat in my car for probably 45 minutes and looked straight out at this roiling, churning sea and was very cranky about it. And I came home having not had the release of the swim, not having had the decompression effect, the exercise altering catharsis that the sea normally delivers to me. Now, I came home, my wife and daughter were just about to sit down to watch James Cameron's Avatar, which was, I think, from 2010, wasn't it? Late 2009, early 2010. A great sort of sci-fi entertainment. And I just knew I wasn't really in the mood to watch that, so I took myself off to a separate couch in another room with my laptop and my version of the Frank Capra movie, which was 1938's You Can't Take It With You. And I enjoyed it quite a lot. And it had some of those stock Capra players, particularly James Stewart and Lionel Barrymore, both of whom feature much more prominently in It's a Wonderful Life several years later. But it's a movie based on the Hart and Kaufman play of the same name. So Moss Hart and George S. Kaufman were playwrights in the 20s and 30s in America, and I think Kaufman had already been a successful playwright in his own right, and may have already been doing screenplays and a bit of directing. And then a younger playwright joined forces with him, Moss Hart, and they did about 6 plays together. One of which was a play I referred to the movie made about that, the movie version of that play a couple of weeks ago in my Christmas movies episode, The Man Who Came to Dinner, which I said starred Monty Woolley, who cropped up in The Bishop's Wife, which I also referred to in that episode. And I watched The Bishop's Wife very happily on Christmas Eve when I was pottering around the kitchen doing the various prep for Christmas Day. And Monty Woolley is actually lovely in The Bishop's Wife. It's a very nice performance. But anyway, this playwriting team of Hart and Kaufman, they wrote that one, The Man Who Came to Dinner, and they wrote the play that You Can't Take It With You is based on. The play of the same name, and they wrote the screenplay then for the movie that Frank Capra directed. And fundamentally, it's I suppose it's an ideological conflict movie about the wealthy and cynical versus the poor but happy brigade. And James Stewart is the son of this enormously wealthy banking family who've been successful bankers for thousands of years, he tells us. And James Stewart is the sort of he's a lot younger than in 1938, and he's a long streak as he always was throughout his career. But he's the sort of goofy, uncaring, whimsical son who charms everyone, and he falls in love with the secretary at the bank, his father's secretary, played by Jean Arthur. And Jean Arthur comes from a family of what? I think I saw one review refer to them as sort of anarchists, but they're not. They're just sort of free thinkers, I suppose. And Lionel Barrymore is the patriarch, and he plays a character that couldn't be further from James Stewart's nemesis in It's a Wonderful Life, where he plays the dark banker in Bedford Falls, the town that James Stewart is in It's a Wonderful Life. But here in You Can't Take It With You, from several years earlier, he's this wonderfully sort of jolly, wonderfully jolly, good-humoured, philosophical patriarch who, in his middle age, the character's middle age, decided like the hard working life was madness, and he wasn't going to be bothered with it anymore, and he just walked out of the office and was like, no, I'm gonna live without that stress and pressure in my life, and I'm gonna take it very easy and just follow my kind of impulses and not be concerned about the rat race. And he has this, his family, over which he is the patriarch. They're just this, bunch of I don't want to say misfits, but characters who are all living very harmoniously, pursuing their own little things. There's this kind of trio of older guys who are in the basement making all sorts of knickknacks and homemade fireworks. There's a granddaughter who wants to be a ballet dancer, but she's not very good, but she's forever dancing around the house. She's married to this southern guy who plays the xylophone with great enthusiasm. And that actor, I want to call him Dub Taylor, I knew he looked familiar. I was watching him and imagine this was 1938, but he cropped up later in Bonnie and Clyde. Now, Bonnie and Clyde is one of the 2 or 3 films which are considered the seminal kind of origin movies of the new Hollywood that took over in the sort of late 60s and 70s in Hollywood, and brought us kind of the auteur directors like Martin Scorsese and Francis Ford Coppola and De Palma and Spielberg and Robert Altman and Hal Ashby and Peter Bogdanovich and all of these guys, and Dub Taylor he plays the father of one of Bonnie and Clyde's gang, and he sets them up for the fateful ambush that sees them riddled with machine gun bullets at the very end of the movie. I remember seeing that scene as a child and being utterly chilled by it. And the violence in Bonnie and Clyde was quite shocking at the time, and as a kid when I saw it, I remember you had that sense of that kind of sickening oof, the hard hitting impact of the kind of uncompromising violence, but the way they ended, absolutely, as I say, riddled with this ambush of machine gun fire, and it was Dub Taylor who set them up. And Dub Taylor, there he is in 1938's You Can't Take It With You. And in any case, you're probably getting the general gist of the movie. So basically what you have is this family of kind of happy, poor loons come up in opposition against Jean Arthur's against James Stewart's rich banking family. And ultimately it's quite sentimental at the end, where the cynical banker, who's the patriarch of his particular clan and the patriarch of the banking sector, it would seem, he has his sort of moist, dewy-eyed moment of, oh, what have I done? I'm missing the point here. I need, to maintain my relationship with my son, and I just need to sit down here and play the harmonica with Lionel Barrymore, and everything will be well in the world again. And it's not that convincing, but overall it stands up very well. Now, what I thought was interesting, there were two things that came out of that movie the other day. One was James Stewart's character on a night out at one of his dates with Jean Arthur. They're out in the park at night, and he's telling her, well, look, I'm not really that interested in banking. Really what I'm passionate about is, and he basically lays out his concept of solar power, and how he and a pal from high school or from college had this idea to harness the power of the sun, the power that makes grass green. And I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. 1938, and here's this character, and he's talking about green power, alternative power. So that was quite striking. Because we kind of think, oh no, these are only relatively recent innovations. Also, the Lionel Barrymore character, at one point, early enough in the movie, he's reflecting on, modern times. And as I say, 1938. And he's going, like, it seems nowadays, if you disagree with someone, they want to drop a bomb on you. Or they want to blow your brains out. I can't remember the exact phrasing. But I just thought, wow, like, there he is in 1938. And he's tapping into this, the polarization of political debate, the polarization of opinion, and the divisiveness, and to disagree with someone would result in a bomb being dropped on you. And I thought that was striking. And if you haven't done the maths already, that's 83 years ago. Have I got that right? Yes, I have. 83 years ago. And I don't even know when Hart and Kaufman wrote the play. It was probably a year or two before that. But that sort of jumped out at me. So even then, you have this character, a very charming character, by the way, in Lionel Barrymore, pointing out, like, the madness of the madness of being the madness of not being allowed to disagree with someone. Sorry, I struggled to get that out. The madness of not being allowed to disagree with someone. And it would seem to me, over the last couple of years, this kind of polarizing dynamic that has happened, this kind of zero-sum game of, agree with me and you're a friend for life, disagree with me and I absolutely hate you, and you're useless, and you must be some sort of sub-intellectual moron. And it seems, it's basically you're either in or you're out, and there's nothing in between. And I have spoken about this a little bit in other episodes. I spoke about it in that episode I did not that long ago on leadership, and I was looking at sort of the way political debate has gone in the United States, and the effect that seems to have had on the the population, the larger populace of the United States, in their everyday back and forths, and what passes for critical, political commentary on the various news outlets and the media, and the scenes that we have seen over the last couple of years in America with the street protests, and the sort of the atrocities and the horror shows there. And it and I'm talking about America now, but I mean it does seem, and I've conceded this, it does seem that has bled into the way a lot of us are, the way a lot of people are expressing themselves, and it seems to be a very, very hostile world out there. And of course, to draw this back to my sort of opening argument, fear and anxiety and a sense of powerlessness or hopelessness, or this a sense of being disenfranchised or disempowered, that can all lead to hostility, that can lead to this sense of being unheard, unvalued, unappreciated, and the anger and resentment that ensue from that shutout, that can get very spiky very quickly indeed. And to have a little confessional moment, if you'll indulge me. Certainly, I found it's been quite a tough year in my marriage, and my wife and I have had our moments, and our own communication has broken down, and resentments build up, and you find you're speaking to someone you really care about in ways that aren't very nice. And you go, this doesn't make sense, and that's born of frustration. It's born of senses of hurt, of rejection, of misunderstanding, and what can I tell you? I mean, anyone who's been in a relationship for a long time, they will just go, that's the way of it. That's what happens. But it's an additional pressure. And I think the pandemic has applied additional pressure to those pressures. And it's all a pressure. It's a pressure cooker. And what comes out of a pressure cooker? Soggy potatoes. That's my memory of pressure cookers. I just remember, you do potatoes in a pressure cooker and they just come out like mash. And if you're someone who used a pressure cooker, you're probably thinking, you just weren't using it properly. And to that I say, you're probably right. And I don't consider that a major crime in my life. So I'm just going to move along. But anyway, what's the point I'm trying to get to here? The point I'm trying to get to go back to You Can't Take It With You, is that 83 years ago in that film, you had commentary on how people were interacting that's relevant to today. You also had someone talking about their desire to create a way to harness solar power, and I thought they were both pretty cool things. And I think there's a point here that I'm trying to make, that is there is always a sense that the world has gone to hell. And so 83 years ago, James Stewart's character is like, there's got to be a better way to provide energy and power to the world. And Lionel Barrymore's character is despairing of the attritional nature of having a different opinion to your neighbour. And certainly we're living in a moment now, what's about to be 22 years into the 21st century, where there's this sort of a global climate of instability, a global climate of uncertainty, a global climate of fear that irreparable damage cannot be, well, by very nature of saying irreparable damage, it's damage that cannot be repaired to the planet. Climate change has never felt more urgent, more present, more brutally sort of final. And obviously we've been living for the last several years in extremely fractious political times in many Western democracies. My father likes to say that the crisis of capitalism is upon us. The ever accelerating wealth inequality. Again, these are things I have touched upon in recent episodes. But I think the point I'm trying to make about what struck me about watching this 83-year-old movie is that we're always sort of in that headspace of, things are terrible, which is not to diminish the things I just mentioned about this current moment in history, but I know I wrote about this aspect of the human experience a couple of years ago on theclearout.com. I'll include that post in the description if you care to read it. But I was quoting Shakespeare and I was quoting Hamlet, and there's a passage in Hamlet where he, the prince who has lost his father and who is engaging with tremendous sort of grief and despair at the state of humanity, and he has a very famous description of where his head's at and how he views life. And I quote, he says, "I have of late, but wherefore I know not, lost all my mirth, foregone all custom of exercises, and indeed it goes so heavily with my disposition, that this goodly frame the earth seems to me a sterile promontory. This most excellent canopy, the air, look you, this brave o'erhanging firmament, this majestical roof, fretted with golden fire, why, it appeareth no other thing to me than a foul and pestilent congregation of vapours." And that's the Shakespeare. And my comment on that was, so roughly 400 years ago, Shakespeare, via the Depressed Prince, was basically saying everything's fecked. And I added, now I have no idea if Elizabethans were as concerned with end times as we are in 2019, which is what it was at the time of writing. But the play was written in or around the start of a new century, so maybe some bleak navel gazing was only natural. And I concluded rhetorically, can we be consoled by the fact that feeling we've ruined everything is nothing new under the sun? And that's the end of that extract from the blog post. But that's kind of the point I'm trying to make in relation to what came up in my mind, having looked at You Can't Take It With You from 1938. And there is a sense that we do this stock take, we do this inventory, and we go, oh my goodness, we really have made a right bloody mess of things. And maybe in a year's time, we'll be saying the same thing, or maybe we'll feel it's been a mess that's been tidied up. I don't know. But I think it would be very understandable. I think it is very understandable if you're feeling somewhat shattered and somewhat wrecked. And it's not just... I mean, this is the pattern every year. You get to Christmas and there's that... I used the word frenzy earlier. I don't think that's an exaggeration. There's this kind of frenetic pace and frenetic busyness to try and pull things together to have that one great day, and you're sort of saving yourself for the big indulgent moment, and then you do it, and then you just collapse like a burst zeppelin afterwards. You just come slowly back down to earth with a flop. It's not an explosion. It's not a dramatic collapse. It's just suddenly all the wind is gone out of your sails, and there's a deflation. And I think it's welcome. I think it's a welcome moment of massive outbreath, and just to go, my goodness, got through another one. Let's not even think about what's coming next. Let's just be here in this moment. And that's really why I wanted to call this episode A Quiet Moment, because that's what I wanted it to be. And I actually, you may have noticed a slight stumble about 10 minutes ago. I had to press pause and go down to my daughter. She woke up. My wife's on a night shift tonight, so I had to go down to my daughter. She woke up. She was a bit distressed, and ironically, to calm her down, having comforted her, and got her back into a more relaxed state and got her back lying down with the duvet over her. I offered to put on some nice calm music to help her go back to sleep, and I chose Arvo Part's For Alina, which you'll only get this if you've listened to the first episode of the podcast back at the end of May. We had a bit of a row about that particular piece of music earlier this year, and my daughter gave me hell over it. But she's down there now and pretty confident. She's gone back to sleep listening to that lovely piece of relaxing music late at night. So there you go. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. I had a couple of more bits of business before I do my sign off. I was looking. Sorry, I just knocked the mic there. I was looking at the wellness app Aura that I've been creating content for the last 6 months, and I came across, I hadn't seen it before, but someone had left a comment on a meditation that I produced for the app. And I did a meditation on accepting unmet expectations. And I think that's a very good area to explore in terms of our mental health and wellness. And you look at a year like this year, and many of us may have come into the start of 2021 thinking, okay, we're gonna put this blooming coronavirus to bed. It's going to be a year of restoration, of wellness, of reconnection, and in many ways, it turned out to be not that at all, and it turned out to be in many ways worse than the previous year. It does take its toll. It has taken its toll for some people in the gravest ways, but for many of us who haven't been infected or haven't gotten sick from it, there is just that fatigue of having to deal with all the other implications of it, and that takes its toll over time. And I think, I think many people agree with this position that there is going to be severe mental health fallout on the other side of all of this. It's already happening. But that idea of expectations not being met, that's very relevant, I feel, for this past 12 months. Those unmet expectations of expecting to be reconnecting, expecting to be moving freely, expecting to be travelling overseas, feeling safe, expecting for this whole thing to be done and dusted. In any case, I did this meditation probably in a more generic way of looking at expectations in our lives and accepting when we can't control outcomes, and accepting when we can't control other people's responses or behaviours. And I was just flicking through the app because I was trying to tally up how many pieces of content I created for the app this year. And I was looking at this one particular meditation, and someone had left this lovely comment, and I can't access the full comment, but it was someone called Alicia had listened to it, and she said, "Powerful, true words, and this may be the single most important meditation I've heard yet on Aura." And she goes on to say something else, but I can't see what it is. And I was like, oh wow, that's a lovely thing to read at the end of the year, having not seeing much feedback on the stuff I've done on the app. So that was very nice for me. So my tail is wagging once more. And yes, let me leave you this week. I'm going to actually leave you with a meditation that I did. And this meditation is one I did for the app, and it's called Emerging from Burnout. And I think it's a nice way to finish this last podcast of the year before, next week it'll be the new year. It'll be a 2022 podcast next Thursday. And I just thought it'd be nice to leave you with this. And what it means is I'm not going to play the usual end of podcast music. So that'll be the last thing that plays on the podcast today. And it's a nice meditation that lasts for approximately 16 minutes. And I hope you enjoy it. And you'll notice a very concentrated change in tone, in terms of the tone and pacing of my voice. The app is meant to be something that's for kind of calmness and being very kind of centered, and so my voice reflects that. So anyway, that's what I'm going to leave you with today. And I hope you have got to the end of the year and feel relieved, or you feel you've done well, and you feel safe, and you feel confident that you're going to roll into the new year in good shape. If you have been listening, I can't tell you how grateful I am that you've given me your ears and given me your time. And some of you have been good enough to contribute to the show financially. Some of you have been good enough to reach out to me and tell you how much you're enjoying it. It's all very meaningful to me and very gratifying, and it gives me the confidence and the motivation to continue doing it. And I hope it'll continue to grow next year. And I hope you can come back and listen to more. So as usual, you can find me on the various social media channels. The Clear Out Podcast on Instagram, the Clear Out Podcast on YouTube, the Clear Out Podcast on, what else am I thinking? What's the one I'm missing? Twitter is the Clear Out 2. I'm having a total brain fart. Twitter, Facebook, the Clear Out Podcast on Facebook. And you can email me if you're so motivated at theclearoutlive@gmail.com. And other than that, if you want to support the show, there's a supporter link in the description to the episode. You can do that to make a small or large one-off contribution. Or if you'd like to be a regular contributor, you can use the Patreon link, which is patreon.com/theclearout. And that can just be a few euros a month, the price of a cup of coffee, if you will. And if you won't, don't worry about it. Life goes on. I'll survive. So, there you go. Thank you so much for listening. Be well, be safe. An anticipatory Happy New Year. Do mind yourself and stay listening, because the next thing is what I hope will be a nice calming meditation that you will enjoy, called Emerging from Burnout. Okay, all the best. Take care. I'll talk to you soon. Cheers. Bye. This is a meditation on emerging from burnout. To begin, please ask yourself into a place of stillness and focus. Invite the idea of self-care and minding into your consciousness, and give yourself permission to make your immediate wellness the priority of this moment. Make yourself as physically comfortable as possible and bring your attention to your breathing. Feel your chest rising and falling as you take in and release air. As you exhale, enjoy the feeling of dropping or sinking or lowering. Know that after your next inhalation that you will relax and soften further as you breathe out. Take a few moments to fully settle into your natural breathing cycle. Your body and your mind are grateful for this opportunity to pause and observe. What is burnout? Is it merely fatigue or the loss of enthusiasm? Is it increased anxiety and diminished appetite for life? Is it the desire to turn away from human engagement? Is it the impulse to slam the door in life's face and refuse to come out? Is it the failure to be inspired and motivated at work? Is it the ever-present feeling of defeat and the conviction you have no resources to withstand it? Well, burnout can be all of these things and more. And if you believe you are experiencing it, you have probably given more of yourself than you could afford to. Burnout is not a symptom of failure or laziness. Quite the contrary, it is typically the consequence of extreme diligence, care, conscientiousness, and application. It is often associated with the workplace and is considered an affliction of the modern worker. But anyone who is rising to the endless demands of their everyday life over a prolonged period of time can be affected. Someone who is running the family home may feel even more frustrated as they do not get to experience the work-home separation. This has also been a very real conflict for the many people who have worked from home during the pandemic period. You may be one of those people. Your home is not meant to be a workplace. That is not what a home is designed for. Home should be a sanctum, a safe place, a place of restoration and recovery, a place where you can be yourself without resistance or compromise, a place where your sense of control is not compromised or intruded upon. Burnout takes away that feeling of peace, of wellness, of strength. Burnout takes away that feeling of capability, of possibility, of positivity. Burnout takes away that feeling of satisfaction, of gratification, of motivation. Before we begin to engage with the idea of replenishing your energy and positivity deficits, let us clarify some relevant points. There is very little in modern life that doesn't condition us to continually strive for excellence. There is very little in modern life that doesn't condition us to continually be on the hunt for bigger prey. There is very little in modern life that doesn't condition us to push beyond our limits to get a better result. There is very little in modern life that doesn't condition us to believe that we have to be amazing in every aspect of our lives. As workers, as family members, as parents, as friends, as romantic partners, as healthy human animals with six-packs and perfectly toned bodies. Let's put some space between us and those concepts. Striving, hunting, pushing, being amazing. These are not 24/7 activities. These are not sustainable for every waking minute of our days. To be in those states in an ongoing way is unnatural. After striving, there should be arriving and settling. After hunting, there should be eating and digesting. After pushing, there should be opening and walking through. After being amazing, there should be contentment and rest. Being depleted of your energy and life force means there is an imbalance somewhere. As stated earlier, you have given away more of yourself than you could afford. So it is time to replenish your stocks. It is time to refill the well. It is time to plough the soil and plant the seeds of your recovery. I am going to ask you to visualize a large earthenware urn that stands as high as a table. It is a work of great craftsmanship, finished beautifully with a metallic blue sheen. This urn represents your energy. And as you look inside it, you are dismayed to see that it is empty. You could turn away and decide there is nothing to be done, but you are not ready to give up on yourself. You stand facing the urn and ask yourself with tremendous care and thoughtfulness if the urn cannot be refilled. You pause and then hear the sound of a single drop of water. You peer into the urn, and sure enough, you see where the water drop has landed at the bottom of the urn. You set yourself into a position to receive energy and slowly begin a large circling gesture with your arms, drawing vertical circles of energy towards your center in an anti-clockwise direction, up and away from your navel, and returning to the same place via your heart chakra. Each circle of energy moves you deeper into your earth chakra and your feet embed in the ground upon which you stand. You continue doing this until you are almost in a trance, and gradually you realize that water drops are falling with great regularity. They increase in frequency until a steady cascade of water is filling the urn. You feel that this is right. It is natural, and it is as it should be. You are not surprised when the urn is suddenly overflowing and water pools on the ground around both the urn and your feet. You smile, and your heart is filled with this abundance of energy. This is your power, your life force, your self-nurturing element. This is available to you at all times, as long as you take the time to refill it. I am going to conclude this meditation with an 8-line mantra that I will say slowly 3 times before finishing. I will not strive when I should stop. I will not hunt when I have what I need. I will not push when there is nothing to open. I will not give more than I have. I will not do more than I can. I will not go beyond my limit. I will refill the urn, and I will be amazing in moments, not as my constant setting. And again, I will not strive when I should stop. I will not hunt when I have what I need. I will not push when there is nothing to open. I will not give more than I have. I will not do more than I can. I will not go beyond my limit. I will refill the urn, and I will be amazing in moments, not as my constant setting. And one final time. I will not strive when I should stop. I will not hunt when I have what I need. I will not push when there is nothing to open. I will not give more than I have. I will not do more than I can. I will not go beyond my limit. I will refill the urn, and I will be amazing in moments, not as my constant setting. It is in your own power to plant the seeds of your recovery. Dig the soil, plant the seeds, pour the water. You will grow again. Thank you for listening.